Hi fellow Webflowers! I often see that Webflow beginners are a bit lost when starting a new project. Beginning with a style guide? Okay, let's do that. But how? There are some YouTube videos on this, but none of them really goes through the process of transferring all the stuff from Figma to Webflow from start to finish. If you're in the same boat, look no further, you've found the right video. I start in Figma and transfer everything necessary to Webflow, and I explain every step to you. And I promise this will be a very efficient method where you don't need to switch all the time between the breakpoints. As an example, I will use a prepared design in Figma, and for the style guide in Webflow, I use the one me and my team created. It's called Flow, and you can find a link to it in the description. And there's also a clonable you can copy. But before you think this is maybe the wrong video for you, listen. You don't have to use this style guide. The steps follow pretty much the same principles for every style guide out there. So let's talk about why you should use a style guide. A style guide is an essential tool for any Webflow project. Imagine it like a library that contains all the global and utility classes you need to ensure consistency across your website. If you're not familiar with these terms, I have a video about class naming strategy where I explain them to you. Without a style guide, you run the risk of getting an inconsistent design. Using a style guide makes it easier to maintain your website over the time. As your website grows and evolves, you can easily update and expand your style guide to ensure that all new changes are consistent with the existing design. This helps to prevent design drifts and ensures that your website always looks professional. A style guide also helps to save time and improve efficiency. By having a centralized library of styles, you can easily apply them to different elements on your website instead of having to recreate them over and over. This helps to speed up your build process, especially when you need to make changes to your website on the fly. But let's talk about how to use a style guide. It is very important to start your project with a style guide. Also, don't forget, add all new styles continuously. I know this can feel like being slowed down, but trust me, on the long run, you, the project, and your client will benefit from it. And by the way, if you want to become one of the top-notch Webflow developers, subscribe to my channel. I publish weekly new content around Webflow, Figma, and creative business. A basic style guide should consist of classes for font sizes like H1 to H6, text colors, background colors, buttons, and form styles. While this is the minimum, many style guides also include spacing systems. This means they come with a preset for paddings, margins, and container width. One thing that I have learned over many Webflow projects is that you can progress much faster when you use the same system in Figma and Webflow. Basically, that means use consistent spacing system and name your Figma styles like your Webflow classes. This way you have to think less and can build without stress. But enough theory. Let's start to set up a style guide.
So for this part of the video, I had to switch to a different microphone, but let's go through the example design. You can see I have here prepared just a simple landing page. And much more important, next to it is our style guide. And I give you a brief overview. So it contains typography, stuff for headlines, body copy. We have here colors, we have buttons, and we have forms. And this is pretty much everything you will find in each style guide out there. So this is like the minimum. And furthermore, this style guide has also settings for containers or presets for containers and a spacing system. Many style guides have something similar like this, and some also have like a spacing system. But on the containers and the spacing systems, you don't have to make changes every time because, yeah, it's pretty default the way it's used. But if it's necessary, you can make changes to it. So, but let's start at the top. So the first thing you can see here is our headlines. And it starts with an H1 and ends with an H6. And a very nice thing to boost your productivity in Webflow is when you name the styles in Figma the same you name your Webflow class. So you can see here my typography styles. They are called is H1 until H6, and the Webflow classes, they are named the same. So the advantage is that when you are in development and you click on a headline like this, you can see here the name of the style, and it actually already tells you the class name you have to use for it. So pretty easy. And the same is here for the body copy. We have here different class names, X large down to X small. And if I click here on this body copy, I can see it is using is TXT medium. And let's go back to our headlines. You can see, so this is the class name. Here you can see the size. Sorry for that. The sizes are not 100% correct. I've changed them just before the video and I forgot to update the values here, but actually they are not necessary. And I will tell you why in just a couple of minutes. If I deselect the frame and I can see again here my styles, you can see here's my H1. It has a size of 61 pixels, 49, 39, 31, and so on. And the second value here, that's the line height, exactly. And here you can see the line height settings, and here just some sample text for it. But let's talk about the magic that will boost your efficiency. So here you can see the type scale for desktop is 1.25 and for mobile 1.15. And there's a pretty cool plugin for Figma you can use for that. That's the result, but let's delete it. It's called Type Scales, and you have some settings. So the base size of 16 pixels is the way to go. This is this one you can use for, I would say, 99% of all projects. And here's the scales. You can type any value you want, but you also have some presets. And major third with 1.25 is a pretty solid scale. It will work for most designs. In some designs, maybe you want to have larger, really bold headlines, but they only work in matter of design. The copy of the headlines is short. If you have long copy in the headlines and you use something like this, you can see how it gets really long. The design won't look good anymore because a headline will have like 4 lines or something like that. So it pretends on the design, but in most projects, 1.25 is the way to go. And here's the basic line height. We can leave it. We can leave it with 1.2. 1.2 is the same than 120%. So if you wonder, and here you can define how many scales you want to have up from the base. So this is the base. We go with 6, and also how many you want to have below. I don't need anything below, so I set this to 0, and the values should be rounded, and let's generate it. So here you can see our base value and the scale that it's using, and it generated all the headline sizes for us. Many times you will receive a design that you want to, and it's your job to transfer it to Webflow. And often, if you check it very carefully, you will see that the headlines that were used in the design are not matching any scale. So in this case, I would suggest you talk to the designer, tell him the benefits of using a scale like that. And if it's okay for him, if you are going to use the scale that gets much closest to the design. If you don't have any contact to designer, talk to the customer and tell him the benefits. The benefits of working with type scales is the maintainability. You will work much more efficient when you build a website, and also maintaining the website is less work, and that's actually the major benefit. It's just a logic way of setting up the entire project. So I've never had the case that I couldn't convince a customer to use type scales for his headlines if it wasn't used in in the design. So I don't think that's a problem because everybody will benefit from using TypeScale. Exactly. And yeah, for mobile, you can just generate a second frame like this and use 1.15 instead of 1.25. Yeah, so that's one way to improve your efficiency in Webflow. So the next thing here in the style guide is the colors. You can see it's always like is BG green, is TXT green, 100, 125, and 150. BG stands for background, TXT for text. And 100 is always the base color, and everything above 100 is it's getting darker, and everything below 100 is getting lighter. This can be different in other style guides, but pretty much it follows the same idea or the same structure. Maybe they have different class names. For example, FinSuite's style guide is working with background color and then green or something like that. So it's more clear what the class is about, but I think BG and TXT is just simpler to type in, and even a customer can understand that pretty quickly. Exactly. So, and then we have here buttons. Buttons, we have a primary style and a secondary style, and we have different states: default, hover, pressed, and focused, and the same for forms. And now let's talk about these containers, because some style guides have presets for that, some not. I like when there's a preset, because if there's a preset like this, it's always, you can work faster. And if it's necessary, you can adapt this default values. But just to give you an idea what it is about, so you can see the different class names. So the first one is container call 12. It stands for column 12, so that it has 12 columns. And this is call 10, call 8, call 6, and call 4. And if I'm now going to copy this over here into my design, I have to select my frame for that. It didn't work. Drag it over. You can see that my containers, they match the columns of the design. So the first one contains 12 columns, the second one 10 columns, and so on. So yeah, let's jump into a Webflow and see how we can transfer this style guide to Webflow. So if we go over to Webflow, we are welcomed by this start page, and yeah, that's the start page of the style guide. There's a link to the clonable in the description of this video if you want to use that one. The start page we actually don't need. It has just some information here. And here's the style guide. It looks pretty much the same than the one in Figma. And we also have here our sample page. It also looks pretty much the same like in the design we saw before in Figma. So the first thing you should start is loading up your fonts. So go to the site settings and go to the fonts tab. And you can see currently I have 2 fonts here, and they're integrated by Google Fonts. It's not recommended to use that way. Here's even a warning with GDPR compliance stuff. So I'm going to delete it here. Yes, I want to delete that fonts. And I'm going to upload fonts. So here are the 2 fonts that I want to use for that project. It's Inter and Sora. And one thing that is important, you can see the file size of these fonts, and there are different font formats like TTF, WOF, WOF2, whatever. And WOF2, so this file format is has the best compressing. You can see Sora only has 23 kilobytes. Inter unfortunately has, even in the WOF2 version, still 104 kilobytes. So Inter is a pretty common used font, but actually the size of the files is not great. So there are better fonts out there in this aspect, but that's maybe another video I will talk about. So I'm going to select both and upload them. Here we are. We can go with the normal settings here. That's fine. It's normal. This is light. And I click upload fonts. And In case you have fonts that are not WOF2, you can use, for example, Cloud Convert. I think it's cloudconvert.com, and you can upload your fonts here and convert them to WOF2. Very important, please check if this is allowed by the font license. Sometimes that's not allowed to do, so be careful with that. And yeah, back to our design. I've uploaded it, and let's go to the designer. You can see everything still looks the same. So it was no problem to change the fonts. So let's go to the style guide. So the first thing is that I'm going to set up the font sizes. And many of you are probably used to go here into the designer and set the font sizes here, then switch down to the breakpoints and change the font sizes here, and do this all the time for all 4 breakpoints. I find this pretty time consuming and boring, and actually it's also unnecessary, because before we were using a font scale, and there's a better way. I have a tool that's currently still in beta. It's here our font size tool, and it will be released this summer. We still have to do a little bit work on it, and as you can see, it's not styled yet. It has to look stylish, of course. But what you can do is you can set the mobile font size. 16 is pretty way too good, and you can set a desktop font size. In this case, we also use 16. That's actually that's the minimum font size. And we can also set a maximum font size. We can set it to 20. I always use 18 or 20. 22 is, for most cases, a little bit too large. If you want to add an important to the CSS to overwrite CSS rules, you can just check this box here. But yeah, actually, it's not really necessary. Here you can show the breakpoints and make any changes to it if you want to. Per default, it's the Webflow breakpoints. And here you can set your font scale. So we can use 1.25 here, and for mobile 1.15. And if we now submit it, it generates the output, and we can copy that one and go back to our project. And here we have some global styles that are integrated in each page, and they are a component. So if I make a change on one page, this change is synced with all other pages. And yeah, here it's already integrated. The only thing that I've changed is this class names, because the default output, you can see it is heading style H5. That's the class names from FinSuite. And for this project, I've used other classes. So I've changed them to is H1, is H2, and so on. One thing that's sometimes necessary in Webflow, I don't know why, but sometimes the body font size is set to a value, even though when you go here and go to the body and this is empty, and even when this is empty, it still sometimes sets a font size, and this makes trouble with the type settings we have here. So in addition, I've used here body font size inherit. So now the body is inheriting the font size from this HTML settings here. So, and the nice thing about this is that you don't have to set up the font sizes for each of these headline sizes and go through all the breakpoints and stuff like that. Just with a couple of clicks, this is done. And if I go over to my sample page, turn on the preview, you can see now it's even responsive, and the sizes are adapting, and yeah, that's pretty great. Back to our style guide, setting up the headline classes is already done, and I think here you already saved up at least a half hour by doing this way. Let's go to the body copy. Body copy, you can set up the normal way. You can use these values here. You can decide yourself if you want to work with EM or REM. It pretends on the scope of your project. Here in this case, in this example, I've used EM. And yeah, you have to set these values according to the design. And if you go to the design, you can see what we're using. So in this case, for example, is TXT medium is 16 pixels. And if I now go to my style guide, I can type here in 16 divided by 16, and this gives me 1 rem. Correct? So that's pretty fine. Because 1 rem always equals 60 pixels. And here I have to do the same. If I now go to this one, it has 24 pixels. So 24 here. I type in 24 divided by 16 and it gives me 1.5. Let's change that to rem as well. And the same here. It's 32 divided by 16. And you can type here rem or pixel or em or whatever. Then it changes this value. So I can see that we have some different colors here. Let's go here and change the color. Okay, fine. Cool. Oh, that's the way you set up your body font sizes. And here we have a lot of helper classes. I won't go into detail now because here's an explanation next to it. This is a class to make a text italic. This is the class to make a text bold and stuff like that. Exactly. There's always an explanation next to it. And yeah, here is some rich text you have to change if you want to. Regarding rich text fields, sometimes it's recommended to use a different type scale, because if you have a larger type scale, maybe on your homepage and the about page, you need a softer type scale on blog posts, because 1.25 can be too large in a blog post. And in this case, you have to go back to Figma, generate an additional type scale, maybe with 1.25 or even 1.15 for desktop in blog post. And then you can change the values here. You can do it like, I have to select my H1 and per default will look like this. I'm selecting the H1. I go here, I select the HTML tag. Now in addition, you can say nest selector inside of rich text. If I do that, the styles I apply now, they will only affect the H1 within a rich text field. So here, for example, now I can go and type in 3 rem or even 4 or whatever you need. And maybe we need also some more spacing here, 5 em or even more or less, however. Exactly. So sometimes it's necessary to use a different type scale here in the rich text editor. Let's go through this and make some just adapted. I do some freehand now. So now you can see I've set up also the styles for my rich text. I just went through it and adapted here a little bit different type scale. I've set some paddings and stuff like this. I actually got the padding here. Is that one? And yeah, it's a little bit different, but just by experience, I can tell you that most of the time it's necessary to use a different scale on blog posts. And then we have here our colors. Colors setting up is also pretty easy. You can see here's the class name, and then in case you need some different color here, let's say violet. I now have to change also the class name. I've changed the text here, but not the class name here. So let's create a new class. Let's call it isTXT violet, and let's choose a violet here. Maybe like this. Copy the hex code, and also I have to change this, but this time I'm not changing it here. I have to click here because here's the class. and I'm deleting it, and type is BG violet 100. And now I go here and can paste my violet color. That's it. And that's the way you can go through all the color values. One more tip, working with shades of colors. If you go here and now you make is BG violet 125, and you're using the same color. Now, if you go to this one, ASB, you can see now that this bubble is just moving up or down. And by moving this down, you can see you can get a perfect darker version of your base color. So that's a pretty cool way to use different shades of your colors. So this is how you change the colors. And yeah, if you want to be extra precise, you can also update this value here. And for your buttons, you can see here's only one compared to our Figma design, because in the Figma design, you can see all states. That's because the states are dynamic here. It pretends on if I hover on it, if I click on it or whatever. So changing your buttons is pretty straightforward. You just define all this necessary CSS here. And if you want to style the hover state, you can go to hover here, and now you can change the hover state. For example, here's a shadow, and you can change the size of it to something like maybe that. Make it smaller, or make the entire thing darker, or give it some different kind of styling. That's it. Now, if you see I hover over it, it changes. And I think we also have a click state. Now, if you didn't do that, but for example, if you now go to focus, make some changes here, and it always follows the same logic if you want to switch or set different styles for different states. Same goes with this secondary one. Here we have a couple of helper classes for the buttons. I won't go too much into details. This is one when the button width becomes 100% of its parent on desktop. Sometimes you want that if you want an extra large button or something like that. Yeah, the same for tablet, mobile landscape, or mobile portrait. So here's the forms. If we go to our Figma style, you can see that we have here different font styles. And now going back here, you can style that. You just have to set the paddings you want to set them. It's always recommended to give them a min height, so they always have a correct size. And if you have a look here, you can see we have actually a padding of 116 pixels here. That is 1 EM or 1 REM, depending on what you're using. And go back here, you can see I've used 1 REM and just 0.5 here. So let's see what's happening if I bump that up to 1 REM. Actually, nothing happens because I have set up a min height here, but let's stay precise and do the same here. And here's a combo class. This one is just form input, and this is form input with the combo class of this text area. And yeah, actually, I'm not sure if we need that. We have a min height here of 8 REM, so that's the thing. And yeah, you can set up a border radius here and a border there. You can make a transition because we also have set up focus style. So focus style is if you click into it, see that the border changes, it lightens up. First of all, there's a transition for it, and you do set the transition on the default style. It's just all to 200. Actually, Webflow doesn't want you to use all properties. So if you want to be precise, just go to the border color. In this case here, it will still work because we're just changing the border color. And now if you're switching to focused and scroll down to borders, you can see here's a lighter version of the color. And there's also one thing if you want to style the placeholder here. It's a little bit confusing, but the placeholder for forms you can style here. So now you can go, if you want to change the color of the placeholder, say more this, because when you now start to type, it's white and the placeholder is more grayish. Exactly. And yeah, here you can also style, select like this, and the checkboxes, and yeah, this submit button has a different color. I don't know why actually. And here's our containers, same like in the style guide. Here's an additional one. It's just full width with 0 padding. It's set to width 100% and max width 100%. So it's always covering the full size of your website. Sometimes that's necessary. For example, if you have a slider on your website and this slider has an overflow, you don't want paddings left. So in this case, you can use container full width the class. So here's the container 12 column. Here's the max width. You can see I've changed the max width. It's not the same like in Figma. Here it is 1225 pixels, and I've changed it here to 1416 and 60M padding. 60M padding is it should be 96. Yeah, so that's fine. But you can see here's the place where you can change these values. And if I go to my sample page and I select a container here somewhere, container column 12, and you can see if I now switch it, or let's go here, it will be more obvious to switch it here to something like 1225, you can see my content just gets more narrow. So that's the place where you can adapt these values. Change it back. And this pretends on your design. If the containers of your design needs to be different, you can just go to your style guide. Yeah. And go through these classes and change the width, the max width of them, just here. Exactly. Then here's also some presets for grids if you want to use. That's actually not part of the style guide. That's like basic components you can use. So I don't go too much into detail here, but yeah, that's something you can use to accelerate your development. And here you can also see all the margin classes, just as a reference, like a cheat sheet if you forgot how the class naming system for this margin works. Also for the paddings. And here are some more helper classes. That's what I was talking about. This is more a kind of advanced style guide that comes with a additional spacing system, helper classes, and so on. A basic style guide will probably only cover typography, colors, buttons, and maybe forms. And actually, that's it pretty much.
So we have set up our style guide and you can start to build the website now. While you build the website, it often happens that you need to create additional styles. Please understand the style guide as a growing library. So if you have to create a new background color, for example, go back to your style guide and add it there. Talking about classes. If you want to learn how to use proper class naming system and how to master element, modifier, and utility classes within Webflow, you should watch this video now. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay in the flow.